We now have the chance to hear from our visiting guest, Daphne Sidney, which is always a pleasure to have with us. So I'll hand over to Daphne. Use the roving mic. Good, because they click on. Yeah, this is the clicker. The one is the worn-off one. Yeah, it's working. Yeah, but.
Well, good morning, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here again, and hope you've all been having such a wonderful time as I have. It was a lovely afternoon yesterday for the ladies, and I think we all enjoyed it very much. Beautiful high tea. So just like to send John and Heather's greetings to you, and they're very happy to be thinking of you and remembering you, and want to pass on their love to you. And I'd like to add my thanks too to Peter and Shay for their wonderful ministry, and also for the many years of Mohan and Nihara, and they're very, very dear friends to us. And when we lived in India, we had 3.5 years serving in India, so but we'd have a visa for 3 months, extend it for another 3, and then at 6 months we'd have to leave. So Mohan and Nihara would take us in as refugees. And I'm sure you've all experienced Nihara's wonderful cooking and hospitality, and just the love that they had for us when we had left India and sort of recuperate a bit before we'd go back again. And so we really do appreciate them and love them so much. And you know, those times you never forget, do you, when people extend that kind of hospitality to you. It's just beautiful. So, and we love Peter and Shay, and what I love about Peter is his shirts. Keep them up, Peter. And I think there's only one thing, Peter, that I would like to see a little bit more of. And I did notice that Peter's not eating Vegemite. So I think you could work with him on that. That's the only thing I could think of, Peter.
I'm going to give it a try then.
Good. Okay, we have to, keep you very Australianised. So what I'd like to do this morning is give you a little bit of church update, since I'm coming from church admin, and Peter said maybe it would be of interest to just kind of give you a bit of an overview. Because, even though we're small congregations really, but it's pretty amazing what God is doing through you all. And I want to extend my thanks to you all for, when you talk to different people and they're all doing little things here and there, and it's just amazing really. So it's just nice to share that. So I hope I might just use this so I can stand it. Is this on?
Yes, please.
Right. Which hand will I use? Get the technology right and we'll all be happy. Okay, Perth Festival, here we are. Amazing, isn't it? On how many days we've gone by already. So as I said, this is a little church update, celebrating, and it really is a time to celebrate, isn't it? We work hard and then we celebrate. So I'll give an introduction on the Love Venue, and then talk about the Pastor's Basket, Emerging Leaders, GC Ignite, SEP, ACCM and the GCI board. So be a quick overview. So I'd just like to start with this, because this is really foundational. This definition really is foundational to all that we do. And you've probably seen it before, but, I just love to keep reading it because it's so beautifully expressed. It is the person and presence of Jesus. That's our foundation, isn't it? The person and presence of Jesus, calling us to love, compelling us to join him in making new disciples, and empowering us through his Spirit to build the church and expand the kingdom. So it gives a pretty clear definition, doesn't it, of what we're here for and what we're about. Making disciples and building the church. And that's corporately and individually, engaging with our neighbourhood. So what Greg has used there purposely is the word engage. more so than outreach, because when you talk about engaging someone, you're talking about more of a mutual respect rather than, hey, I've got something I can outreach to you and I can give you that you don't have. It's more like a mutual sharing and an engaging with someone, because we don't want to just outreach and give things but not engage, because it's the person and it's the personhood of Jesus Christ that we want to get across. And then all of this outreach and engaging events inherently create pathways connecting back to the life of your church. So what Greg's explaining there is that, you know, we want people to link back to the life of the church. We don't want to just do something out there and not link them back in, because we are a church. That's what we're about. And as Greg explains, you know, church is not something man-made. It's not just our idea. It's God's idea. The church is a beautiful thing that we want to invite people into, because really church is where people find the healing, isn't it? You know, I come here and I feel such warmth and love. I feel, you know, I'm away from my family at home, but I feel embraced by family here. I feel so loved. And isn't it lovely that people can be invited into that kind of environment? Because a lot of, you know, the big thing now in society is loneliness. That's pretty much a number one issue, loneliness. And what a beautiful place to be able to come. Fellowship, talk, chat. You know, people need to be able to talk. And isn't it lovely our church has that wonderful fellowship? You know, we can spend hours after church. And that's very healing. That's very healthy. That's a lovely thing to be able to do. So that kind of defines, gives a good definition and foundation really for all that we're doing as a church and all our engagement in the community. Oops. So here's just a few pictures of community engagement. I'm sure, you know, you're doing things here and in Bunbury that I've heard about, so thank you for all that you're doing here. And unfortunately, I can't put all the pictures up. But that's the tree planting and care bags, and then that's my little picture there with our Indigenous. I always like to engage with our Indigenous if I can during NAIDOC week. And they put on a little dance at a shopping centre, and then they had pictures taken later, so they let me hold the spear. So I thought it was pretty special. It's not a very clear picture, but it was a beautiful occasion. So the pastor's basket, this is our overseas missions. Now we have there Pastor KK and his wife Nasama. They are the superintendents of Africa. I don't know if you've ever met KK and his wife. KK's, you have, oh, he's the most beautiful man, isn't he? Yes. And his wife Nasama, she has such a heart for the brethren, because many of them don't have a high education, or they don't have a lot of employment opportunities, and so she is providing livelihood projects for them to uplift their lives and to encourage them. So the overseas mission that we sponsor, it is about empowering the members and really to uplift their lives. I won't read all of this, but you know, if some of you would like to look at this more later in detail, you're welcome. So some of the challenges, a lot of the members have a low level of education, sometimes a mindset of dependency, which is not what we want to be about. Sourcing of partners to assist and supervision of projects. So Nasama does a wonderful job in training. She uses the United Nations material to train and uplift the people. And here's some of the projects that she's working with them on, giving the training sessions. And some of the girls there are doing the interior design. I think they're making pelmets and curtains. Now this project here is brick making. And this is a fantastic project because what they're doing is the school there they do this brick making as a project to earn income to help the school. So because before they were asking for overseas help for the parents to be able to pay the school fees of the children. Now what the parents are able to do through this project, they're able to make the bricks and earn an income and pay the school fees. So whereas before they didn't have cash at all to pay for the school fees, now they're able to make bricks, and that is paying payment for the school fees. So, you know, the parents are so happy because they can do it themselves. People want that dignity and worth to be able to do it themselves. Oops. Yeah, so there's just some of the children at the school. We also have the Emerging Leaders program. So I love this quote from John McLean. The church needs young people and the young people need the church. That's a great expression, isn't it? And isn't that so true? So the Emerging Leaders program aims to equip our young people in ministry and in life. And it has been in making for many years. John had this vision. I remember being on the board, and Tash, you might remember it too. John was saying we need to be identifying our younger leaders. We need to be working with them. And this year we had them up at the national office to link them in with the church for a training weekend. So this included 3 visitors from New Zealand and Fiji as well. And so it's about making room for young people to take up valued roles in the church. We don't want them to feel they can't do anything until they're 60. You know? They're young, and let's get them involved. Because, you know, being involved and contributing is really when people feel valued, isn't it? So we have interactive topics. These are just some pictures of the activities that we had at the weekend. Sharing ideas and sharing. You know, Steve Jobs said one of the most valuable things that he did in the new company that he set up was he put a place right in the middle of all his offices where people would have to bump into each other, where they would have to share ideas. Because he said you cannot put a value on ideas, and encouraging that sharing of ideas. And that's part of what we're trying to do with our young people as well. And just the activity in the late afternoon, walking on our beautiful Gold Coast beaches. They enjoyed activities as well. Then we have GC Ignite. This is for an age group from 18 to 30. So it means that after SEP, our young people have a next step. So sometimes they might feel, after SEP, what then? But now we have GC Ignite. So save the date. We're looking at having it over Easter weekends in April. Next year it will be 10 to 12 April. So that's for inspiring young people to come together to worship, to have fun, to learn more about themselves and God. The theme last year is, what do you say I am? Or who do you say I am? So we're always focusing around Jesus Christ and who he is, and helping them to have their identity in Christ. There's a picture of them under the tree there. We had sessions there at the Redland Bay Centre. More interactive learning and sharing. Cooking. John did a wonderful session on personality types, the Myers-Briggs, and they really thoroughly enjoyed that. And then, of course, we have SEP 2020 coming up. So thank you so much for the fundraising that you're doing to help towards that. And that's, of course, for young people ages 12 to 18. So far we have over 50 campers who are registered. And we'll be discipling our young people, bringing them to Christ. That's really the goal of SEP. Through worship, Bible discussions, fun activities, fellowship and belonging. Again, it's so important for our young people to feel that sense of belonging. That's what we want to create for them. That'll be January 5 to 11, 2020. So if you can remember these things in your prayers, that would be so much appreciated also. Just some pictures from the last SEP. The next thing I'd like to mention is Ambassador College of Christian Ministry. I guess most of you would be familiar with ACCM. So John is the author of that, and Nadia Worthing is now the registrar. So it's a diploma course in Christian ministry. It's now GCI's official denominational training course. So Greg Williams has endorsed that as our official training for new pastors and for existing pastors. So it's become a very valuable tool now around the world. It offers 10 courses. People can enrol online or at intensives, have a weekend intensive. And you can take it for credit or for audit. If you take it for credit, then you submit assessments, and those assessments are marked, and you get a nice feedback on it. We have one graduate here, I believe. Did you want to say anything about, would you like to make any comment about it?
Brilliant. Everybody should do it.
Okay.
It's not hard.
No, it's not hard, is it? Yeah. Yeah, it's made to be very practical so that people can do it in their own time and online or at intensives. So the ACCM course now has 10 courses. Doctrines, that's a fairly new one, Doctrines of GCI. Jesus and the Gospel, Spiritual Formation, Christian Leadership, the Bible, that's also a new one. It's just come online. Effective Communication, Worship, that's reasonably new. They did a worship intensive in Melbourne not so long ago. Preaching, Pastoral Care and Applied Christian Ministry. So they're really interesting topics, and you don't have to take them in any particular order, except the last one comes last. But yeah, they really are fantastic materials. And highly valued now around the world, which is great. So this was John in 2018, training teachers. So what John was doing there is training teachers from the Caribbean, from Canada, from Latin America. So those teachers then can go out and take it into those countries. So you can see how it's expanding. And Betty there sitting to the left of John, that's Betty Brunette. She also translates into French for us. So if we have French sessions, she's the translator. She's a very wonderful lady, very dedicated and loving. There's an ACCM intensive that's in Brisbane, just held that in August, and that was on the GCI doctrine, so that was a wonderful course. John and Phil Hopwood did that one, and it's very enjoyable. You know, it's a wonderful way of learning, is that, you know, getting together, and it's interactive, it's over a weekend, and it's very uplifting and encouraging. It's a great way to learn. They say, you know, adults learn best by interaction. You know, that interactive style is really one of the best way that we do learn. Through group sharing, this is an intensive in the US, in Portland. They had, I think, this past year. Oops, sorry, too quick. Some teacher portraits, as I said, that's Betty Brunette. She's the French translator. That's Cara, she's a young lady who's just come on board. She's now working in the Home Office. She's a wonderful young lady. And Anthony Mullins, he's also a teacher in the US. So there are actually more, but I could only just, you know, choose a few pictures. So ACCM continues to expand, and we have 3 new cohorts have just signed up from Malawi, Zambia and South Africa. So, you know, you can remember them in your prayers. So isn't it fantastic that what's John has written and what's coming out of Australia and what you really sponsor to a large degree, it's just so encouraging that it is a blessing to much of our world. And US and Canada, that's also ongoing. So it's gone global, and of course that keeps John very, very busy, as you can imagine. Because, you know, things have to be constantly updated. It's on the whole computer system, so that has to be updated. If we're talking about translating into Spanish, you know, that's going to be massive. You know, there's a lot involved. So please remember John and Heather in your prayers, and ACCM. These are some comments from participants. It was a priceless opportunity to get together, learn and talk. It was a fantastic weekend, providing communion with others as well as shared memories and experiences. An answer to my prayer for spiritual growth and equipping for service. They're just a few comments. Very encouraging. So this is the coming now to the board, and we appreciate Peter is on our board, and we've had Tash on our board before, so we always love to have a rep from WA, and we do appreciate Peter coming across. You'll see John there as our Australasian superintendent. myself as chair, then Janice, and then at the back row is Matt Goodsey from Melbourne, much loved Peter, and Hans, and Dennis Richards, he was visiting, and David Shivers, he was also a visitor. So we do try and have visitors as well. So an overview and purpose of the board, it's really to cradle the vision of the church, which is... yeah, living and sharing the gospel, that's right. And healthy church, isn't it? Living and sharing the gospel and building healthy church. So the board there is really to provide mature and informed advice and counsel to the superintendent of Australasia. It is the governance body of the denomination in Australia. It deals with big picture policy issues. It's not a management committee, it's a governance, so it does more of the overall. Board members carry a legal responsibility for a legally constituted entity. In other words, GCI churches cannot operate legally without the entity. So the policies, procedures, audits, insurance, all of this is covered by a central body, so that when you come to church you don't have to worry about all of that. Because if there's not a central body that's doing the auditing and all that kind of thing, that means that every individual church would need to have a board. Every individual church would need to have audits. So it's wonderful to have it centralised, and then so when you come to church every week you don't have to think about all of that. It's done, or it's in process. And you know, we appreciate David in the office very much. Oh, I'm sorry, he wasn't in that board picture because he was the one taking the photo. But David Jordison and his wife Sarah, they do a wonderful job in the office, and David takes care of much of that kind of thing, so we do appreciate them as well. And you know, we only have a small office staff to cover all of this kind of things, so thank you too for your prayers for the office staff, and they do a good job. Just some board principles there. The church is a spiritual body, but we have to comply with government regulations. So, you know, there's always that balance of needing to follow the government regulations. And we are registered with ACNC, which is the Australian Commission for Not-for-Profit Charities. So they have quite a few regulations that the church must be abiding by. They've just brought in external conduct standards, and so that's for anything that we send overseas. So we have to make sure that what we send overseas is properly accounted for to protect the church, and what they're trying to do is to protect money going overseas, that it's not going overseas for terrorism and that kind of thing. So they brought in all of these rules and regulations that we have to be careful that we're abiding by. Of course, we have child safety requirements as well. You'll all be familiar with the Royal Commission that came out, and churches really have to respond to the community. The community expects that churches will respond in that way and become very responsible in caring for children and making sure that there is no abuse within churches. So we have to be very careful about responding and reporting, and we also have to be very careful about training and working with children checks. So thankfully we've been able to employ a child safe system online that any volunteers now can do that online training. Means that they've got the training there, it's standardised, and it's also documented, because documenting is also a very important aspect for the Royal Commission. So that's just a brief overview of some of those things with the board. GCI Australia has governance of Australia, Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea, New Zealand, and under New Zealand is Fiji and Vanuatu. So it's pretty broad spread, isn't it? There's a map: Australia, New Guinea, Solomon Islands, New Zealand, Vanuatu and Fiji. So the National Director for New Zealand is Dennis Richards and his wife Sue. I don't know how many of you would know Sue and Dennis, a lovely couple. He's the national director, and then he reports to the Australasian superintendent and comes to Australia 2 or 3 times a year for meetings, and we have that support for one another and a lot of communication between the two for support. So the annual board has a retreat, an annual retreat. The board needs to be very prayerful in seeking God's heart and God's purposes. And as Tash would know, we usually do something creative during the board. Because when you use creativity, you're using more connections in the brain and, encouraging. So I get the men there, painting or something. This one was where they put different values together, and we put them all on one page there. So, but it is a prayerful time, and we do not only seek God's hand. Of course, we need to be financially stable, and that is always, you're always wondering how we're going to meet the end of the year. But, by God's blessing, and thank you for your generosity, we're able to do that generally. But, of course, seeking God's heart. What does he want for the church? Where are we going? What is the overall direction? What is our strategic plan? So, as I said, New Guinea comes under Australia. Mark Latham has been visiting up to New Guinea for around 26 years now. It's gone up around 26 times. This was the last visit. Just happened in August. That's Mark right there in the centre. And he visits up there once a year with another pastor to go up and encourage the members up there. In Mount Wilhelm, we have a church of around 80 people, and it's quite a community. So, they have a very difficult political situation in New Guinea. It's very difficult for the members. They're subsistence farmers, and it's not easy for them. So when Mark goes up, he takes a lot of materials up for them. He gives them a lot of encouragement and help. So that's important once a year that they have that. There's the Mount Wilhelm part of the group, and that's my husband in the middle there. And he went up this year with Mark. That's his second time up to go recently in the last 2 years. But we'll be looking for some younger ones to go up now, because I don't think Bill can go up again. It's pretty taxing up there. It's very cold. The elevation is around 6,000 feet. You can see they've got some jackets on there, but it's not easy going. But they're absolutely wonderful people. They're so warm and loving, and they do appreciate visitors, and they do appreciate being connected with us here in Australia. There's the PNG service in Mount Wilhelm. As I said, it's around 80 people. This year it was down a little because of the political unrest. It affects the whole economy, means that the members can't travel to, sell their things in a market. It's too dangerous. It's just very difficult really for them. And Bill said, at night time when they travel, they don't even have a torch. I said, why don't they have a torch? They're going through the mountain without a torch. He said, they can't afford one. They don't have a battery, or, the things we take for granted. And Bill was so happy because the first night there he was given one bucket of hot water to have a shower in. That's a privilege. Yeah. There's our dear Josephine and her husband Arnold. They're just absolutely wonderful couple. Josephine has been, she's a very long time member, and she was serving in the house up there, so when the pastors go up they have somewhere to stay, and she would do the cooking and look after them. And that's her husband Arnold. Unfortunately, Josephine now has second stage cancer. So I'd like to put her picture there for your prayers. She's just a beautiful long time servant, and she'd always look after people when they go up there. And when Bill and Mark were there this past August, she was actually in the hospital at the Kundiawa base hospital, and she was having some blood transfusions, and what she really needs is some radiation. Now unfortunately there is no radiation equipment in New Guinea. which is really sad. So we have been looking at how we could possibly help her, perhaps in other ways. So we do really need prayers for her. But the government, it's very sad because when they had APEC there earlier in the year, they bought around 40 Lamborghinis to transport world leaders to impress them, and now they can't afford one radiation equipment. It's just heartbreaking, really. I don't know. This is how it affects people in their daily lives. Yeah, but that's Josephine, very beautiful lady. And her lovely husband, Arnold. They call him Rambo, but he's as gentle as. He doesn't really like the name Rambo. He's Arnold. Yeah, beautiful man. Then, of course, we have the Solomon Islands, also under Australia's governance. That's a little bit of an old picture there. But you see Mr. Duro there in the middle, and then a little bit further along at the back is our elder there, Henry Cooper. He's now living in Honiara as well. Mr. Duro there wrote a letter in asking for a visit, and my husband at that time was visiting in those areas, and so my husband found his way to Honiara, then Gizo, then a canoe across to Ranonga Island where he was. And when he got there, he saw this man in the water, and he's really a chieftain, so Bill's expecting a big man. So he walked up to this man and he said, "Do you know where I could find Chieftain Jiru, Alakira Jiru?" And he said, "I am he." He said, "I've been waiting 9 years for God to send someone, but I knew he would send someone." He's just so faithful. And all that time, just so faithful and beautiful man. And Bill said, to baptise him was like just picking off a fruit that's just so ripe, so ready, Yeah. And since then, his whole village in Ranonga has become a village of GCI. And so that's where we have our main village church on Ranonga. And it really is a community, a village church, because before church they ring the bell. They give it one ring to say it's 10 minutes to come, and then 2 rings, or you know what I mean. It's just beautiful. This was the last trip that Phil and Bill did. Phil is from Melbourne. That was Henry there in Honiara. And there were 7 baptisms this past year. To see the beautiful young people. They're just so lovely. And you can see there, Shanae, she's one of our emerging leaders. She also went up there. We'd like to give our emerging leaders and our young people those opportunities to be on mission trips. And she did a wonderful job giving some time with the children, telling them stories and Bible stories and just working with them. So that's also very encouraging for our young people and our emerging leaders, that they have those sort of opportunities. So now there is Chief Timothy Naki, that's right. So he is now 92 years of age, and he is the chieftain of that island. And when Bill was up there years ago, 30 years ago, Bill baptised him. And Bill had not been back for 30 years. So when Bill walked into that room, and Timothy Naki, and they saw each other, there was just such a moment of emotion and love. And Phil Van Dyke was saying, it just blew him away, just the love that was oozing out of Timothy, in that connection. There's just a beautiful connection with those people. So Timothy Naki has just been such a faithful man all these years. He's now 92. He's got diabetes and not well, but he still he's still the chieftain of the island. And there was a man, a politician who had lost an election from another island. And of course, in some of those places, if you lose an election, nobody really wants to know you. So that man came to Ranonga, and he said to Chief Timothy Naki, "Could I live on your island?" And you know what Timothy Naki said? "You are welcome." You are welcome here. See, that's the love and the beauty, isn't it, of Christ, and of how that's reflected in our faithful members. So that's a very beautiful story. So just going back to that again, it is the person and presence of Jesus. So we see Jesus in all of these people, calling us to love, compelling us to join him in making new disciples and empowering us through his Spirit. So it's through the work of the Holy Spirit. And you can see the work of the Holy Spirit before you get somewhere. You can see the Holy Spirit's already at work with the people to build the church and expand the kingdom. So I'd just like to give a little message now that sort of follows on from that. I don't know, you've been sitting for a while. Would you like to just stand up for a moment or have a little break, and then we'll... Good. One thing I forgot to show you before is some of the bags that part of the projects that Nasama is doing with the young women. She's giving them training on sewing, and they're making these bags, and they're beautifully made. You can see that they're lined on the inside. So, you know, she does really quality things with them. And she's saying, you know, how one young woman who is a single mum who had no hope of getting work and felt very hopeless. She got her trained into sewing and making things, and how it's just brought hope, you know, to women who otherwise really don't have a chance. You know, employment is difficult there for them in many places. So, you know, Nasama's wonderful in the sense of how she brings hope. And she said, to one person, one by one, we bring hope. Yeah, and they're beautiful bags, aren't they? You can have a look at them later. And then other little things, you know, very colourful. So I'll leave them up here. You can have a look later. So, yeah. General Reisner was a prisoner of war during the Vietnam War. He was imprisoned at the famous Hanoi Hilton. He was a prisoner of war for 7 years. That's a long time to be a prisoner of war. But for more than 3 years, he was in solitary confinement. That's even worse, isn't it? Is there anything worse that you can do to human beings? But during that time, they developed a tap code. So that was a way of communicating with each other. They developed ways, you know, they'd tap certain on the pipes or however they could to communicate with each other, because they knew it was so important to keep that communication going, that was the way that when new prisoners of war would come in, that, you know, they could encourage them and help them and say, you're not alone. That's so important. Communication, they realised, was so valuable and so encouraging and important for the new ones and for all of them. General Reisner was a man of faith and optimism, and he helped many others. He attributes his survival to faith in God and prayer, and he talks about his hourly prayer that he did. In a seminar with Zig Ziglar, he was telling his story of his imprisonment for 7 years. 7 years. And then he had 7 months, out of those 7 years, 3 years in solitary confinement, and out of that 7 months in total darkness. They boarded up his 8x8 cell, so there was complete darkness. So that is even worse, isn't it, than solitary confinement. Now they're adding darkness, you know, with the intention trying to break his spirit. One day, in desperation, he was lying on the floor of his little cell, and he began to search for a slither of light. And so he's hoping, maybe if I search around, maybe there could be a slither of light. And he found the tiniest crack. Peering out with one eye, he could see one blade of grass. And he said he could not find the words or the vocab to express his joy of emotion and gratitude. One blade of grass, one slither of light. How he was so full of gratitude and joy. So it fits in so well today, doesn't it, with the gratitude. And it made me think, how much do I grasp the value of light that we have been given? And we have been given a wonderful light. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about that. And I'm just amazed how it fits in with what you were saying this morning about light. It was beautiful, wasn't it? And the first thing that God created actually was light piercing into darkness. And light is something to be so valued and so precious. So Paul, in his second letter to the Corinthians, talks about this. So in 2 Corinthians 4, verse 6, it says, "For God, who said, 'Let light shine out of darkness,' made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ." So light first shines in our hearts that we may shine it to others. And that is the light of Jesus Christ and the face or the person of Jesus Christ, which is relating back to our love venue definition, isn't it? It's the person and the presence of Jesus Christ. And as he puts the light in our hearts, then we can shine it out to others. It says though, but we have this treasure in jars of clay, and we have feet of clay, don't we? That this all surpassing power is from God and not from us. So we always give him the glory, and we know the power and the light comes from him. We are hard pressed on every side. Well, this is Paul talking about his trials and troubles. We are hard pressed, but not crushed. Like that man in the prison, hard pressed but not crushed. Perplexed but not in despair. Persecuted but not abandoned. Struck down but not destroyed. We are always carrying around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. How beautiful is that? So we do go through times of discouragements. It's not easy at times, but we're not crushed. We're not despairing, because we carry the life of Jesus. We carry the resurrected Christ in us. For we who are alive are always being given over to the death for Jesus' sake, so that his life may be revealed in our mortal body. Going up to verse 16, it says, "Therefore we do not lose heart." And sometimes we can get discouraged and we think, oh, with this or with that, why can't we with this or that? But it says, "Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away." Or outwardly we are getting older, aren't we? But that's okay. "Yet inwardly," this is the important part, "inwardly we are being renewed day by day." And that is really the key, that inward renewal every day, just soaking up the face of Jesus so that the light remains in us. And the prayer, through prayer and in his word. "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." And it's often good to keep our troubles in that perspective, isn't it? Eternal perspective. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, because sometimes what is seen we don't always understand why it's this way or that way, but we fix our eyes on what is unseen. And as I said yesterday, that is really the sovereignty of God, isn't it? He does amazing things. Who would have thought that the baby Moses would be saved by putting him in the Nile? The Nile was actually the instrument of destruction, and yet, that is the sovereignty of God. "For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." And just going now to 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 14, it says, "For Christ's love compels us." So it's his light in us and his love in us, and that is what compels us. "Because we are convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again." So our lives are not anymore living for ourselves, but living for the Jesus Christ in us, that we can take the light to our communities and to take that out into the world. And it is the light of Jesus and his love that we take to our communities, and we don't allow discouragement to stop us. Keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus and not allowing the worries and cares of this world to drag us away. And there's just so many things that can drag us away. And, yesterday I was speaking about the social media and the things that just so totally distract us and absorb us, and we can be drifting away from what is really important. Keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus. Yesterday I spoke of faith and grace. Today I add optimism and hope. So faith, grace and hope. And we always keep hope in mind because we know we have a God who's working for us. Let us keep growing and going in the light of Jesus. That is our what we are called to do, to live and share the gospel. It's good to keep that high in our mind. And Jesus said he came to seek and save the lost. It's a very simple sentence, isn't it? A beautiful sentence. Seek and save the lost. We can keep that upper mind in our hearts and let the light flow in and through us. So I wanted to thank you all very much for your generosity and for your faithfulness and just encouraging you. Please just keep going and let's just keep going together. No matter what the difficulties are, we know God is there and we know that he is sovereign and he works things out. Not always the way we think it might be, but we trust in his sovereignty, in his grace, in his love, and we walk in faith. So thank you so much, and I just wish you all a wonderful year ahead, and thank you for the blessing of being here with you all, for your love and warmth. So thank you.